artists who are emerging or mid-career and don't have huge budgets to be able to show work that can inspire it or is really interesting and not necessarily what you described as the pretty dances, you know, but is about energy or that process, and people can maybe even participate. Those aren't always the most popular ones, but they're invigorating and needed, and there needs to be space for those things to be shown to and created.
Well, let's see, I just wanted to say I think that the ODC thing is interesting, and it's not necessarily all about them. It's just about there being one space that has kind of a lockhold on a lot of space, and that has like what's considered the best of the alternative spaces. And so it just becomes a very powerful thing. And it just, their aesthetic is going to have a certain amount of power within the community, whether they mean it to or not, it seems like. And so it's just an interesting ecology that I think we all need to be aware of and figure out ways to balance it so that the other spaces do have value, and that, you know, that we go about trying to actively make that happen. I do think that part of the shift really is the .com boom and bust that happened while you were gone. Things changed a lot, it seems like to me, during that time.
Of the many Bay Area books that should be written, I think one of them is just on the early 90s. I think that from the late 80s to, say, the beginning of protease inhibitors was, and then we could, you know, you could pick either 95 when the AIDS drugs came in, or you could pick 98 when the .com was like, it's really clear that the city's gentrifying rapidly. So you could pick one of those as the ending points. But there were some things that were happening in the early 90s that had a very vibrant, raw kind of feel. And it was almost to the point where people were going to shows and complaining if there was like, oh, another one with capoeira moves, contact improv, wrestling, an improv section. Like, people were complaining about this, a particular vocabulary actually even dominating a scene. But those people didn't move for any one reason. It's actually, when I look, I know all of the players individually, and it's like, these two people stopped, one person had an injury, she moved to Berlin, Ricky Darnell stopped the high-risk group, you know, Knee Jerk was going on, Jessica Lutz, you had the 3 people who moved to New York, this person who did that, the one person who had a baby. I mean, it's actually more about just some kind of moment, a moment happened, and then there was transition, and I feel like different things have happened since. I think the Buto scene was also really a different kind of vibrant in the first half of the 90s than it was in the second half. That from my perspective, in terms of just the excitement of the moment, how where the Buto Festival was at, where you know, Osseous Labyrinth, all these different people that were doing things at different moments. So, I mean, it's complicated how things change and move, and I actually, this is one of those, like, I think ODCs, and I don't mean this as the company dancing, but I could say this in relationship to the company dancing as well as the space. I actually think that their influence is actually much less than you would expect from the resources and the visibility. I actually think that's actually part of the problem, not what their influence is, it's what their influence isn't. Like, what it isn't as the most vibrant space that it could be for research and dance and training.
Can I just say, I don't like to touch.
But it's okay.
I mean, I come from France, and I have been here for 2 years now, and I just feel that what happened on a big stage or bigger stage here is not representative, that the community, the diversity is not really here in some ways, and it's a bit frustrated because you can see a lot of the same things, or you can try to find some qualities too, or some diversity that you just show or talk about, and sometimes it's just poor, a little bit poor. So.
One small last comment on the ODC thing, which is just about the merger with Rhythm and Motion, which at first really pissed me off, just because I didn't want to have this, like, you know, hybridization of the two things. Just like, oh no, let one person have their own identity, it's okay. But actually being there, there's something that's pretty amazing, which is having all these previously isolated communities at least getting to pass each other in the hall. I'm going, oh, what are you doing? Oh, right. And the conversations in the bathroom are really interesting. No, I'm serious. You know, it's like somebody's talking about going to Haiti to study with somebody, and somebody else is like, what? Oh, okay. You know, so there's some really interesting community dynamics that have happened there that or continue to happen every day. So just to call that out as a really positive thing about that site.
And it's brand new. I mean, it's brand new. It's 2 years, right? Barely 2 years. So it'd be interesting to see where it is in the next 5 to 10. It's brand new. And I am an artist in residence there, but on the administrative side, not doing work, and getting some mentoring and just having some access. And you know, I think they're still trying to figure out what that space is about too, and how they can be more inclusive and open. I think that's part of an ongoing conversation. I know it's one that I certainly have brought up, you know, specifically with Rob and programming. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see where it goes, but I think raising a voice is important. And again, I think it has more to do with who's doing the work and where they're doing it, and to not be intimidated by a particular space or what a feeling is around the space, but to get out there and do the work and find those, you know, those opportunities or conversations to let people know, you know, what you're thinking about. I mean, I'm all about communication, and because if you just have a feeling about something, sometimes people don't even know that that feeling about them exists.
Kathy? I'm not really sure where to start. Just a lot of different things that I've heard. This, Keith, you put out this thought that the dance community here has a lot of fragmentation, and that's been my experience as well. I grew up here and also experienced it as a very transient community, and that was partly why I left, and also what made it easy to come back. The fluidity and the fact that people come and go and the culture is always changing. But I found it very hard to move back here after living in Europe for 15 years and dancing there, and having had my dance education there and done most of my dancing life there. I've found that the Bay Area also to be quite poor in many ways in dance, and yet I'm committed to being here now. I go to see a lot of performances, and I'm really curious about what people are doing. And find one of the things that I find a little sad is that it is very fragmented, and people don't seem to really know what's going on outside of their own little camp. And for example, I was a little disturbed by your remarks about postmodernism, because my understanding, many of the people from the Judson Church area were my teachers, and that was a very diverse group of artists. The whole postmodern generation, Steve Paxton developed contact improvisation, which, as we know, has been a huge influence in the Bay Area. Trisha Brown has gone on to be one of the most copied movement styles of choreography in the last 30 years. Very highly technically trained dancer she works with now. Lucinda Childs, yes, was very minimalist, working with Steve Reich and other minimalist composers, repetitive movement, but otherwise I wouldn't really describe that work as minimalist, and I certainly wouldn't polarize it from necessarily from some of the dance theater work that's popular here in San Francisco. Simone Forti's work is very content-driven, another person from that generation who works with text and stories and animal movement, who was a student of Anna Halprin. So I'm really, yes, and I've had that experience as well of the Europeans coming here and looking for the roots of postmodern dance and having a hard time finding it, and being a little shocked by in certain ways how modern dance here is still back in the 50s and 60s. And yet I think that there's a lot of curiosity in the Bay Area as well, and I'm wondering what it would take for this community to become a little more cohesive. And I have friends who are ballet dancers,